The council chamber reeked of tension and metallic incense, a scent Kale thought was supposed to be intimidating, but mostly just made him cough and flail around like an idiot. Elysra stood on the raised platform, her long ears angled back in irritation, dark eyes narrowed at the circle of her own kind. Her hair fell over her shoulders like liquid night, and she adjusted the clasp of her cloak with a grace Kale could never hope to mimic. "You really shouldn't have brought him," she said, voice smooth but edged with annoyance. Kale's mouth opened, then closed. He had absolutely no plan for what to say in a room full of alien aristocrats wielding energy blades and disapproval in equal measure. I was just, sightseeing." Kale offered weakly, waving a hand toward a floating orb that pulsed with the council's attention. It drifted closer, scanning him in a way that made him feel like a particularly nervous insect. Elysra snorted, the sound like silk sliding over steel. "You sightseeing? Among the death squads of my own species. Truly, you redefine stupidity." The council hissed among themselves, and Elysra's pale fingers tightened around the edge of the platform. "Enough chatter," the head of the council said, a tall, angular figure with skin like polished obsidian and eyes that glowed faintly in crimson. "Elysra, your crimes cannot be overlooked. You have consorted with humans, endangered the integrity of our kind." And his words were interrupted by a loud crash, as Kale stumbled over a small hovering pedestal and nearly fell onto the council's main holographic map. "Almost destroyed your career prospects, apparently," Kale mumbled, scrambling to right himself. Elysra's lips twitched. "You are insufferable," she muttered, and the edges of her cloak shimmered like starlight in annoyance. The council didn't pause. "Execution is the only option," the chief said, extending a blade that hummed with ionized energy. Kale's eyes widened. "Execution, really? Couldn't we, I don't know, have tea first, or maybe a dance-off?" He didn't get a chance to expand on the idea. Elysra grabbed his wrist, yanking him behind the platform with a speed that left him seeing streaks of violet light. "Do not try my patience, human. One more stupid suggestion and you'll discover the vertical properties of gravity firsthand." Kale blinked. That sounded like a threat, but also a promise. The chamber erupted as Elysra lunged, moving with fluid precision that Kale could only describe as terrifyingly elegant. He tried to follow, nearly tripping over his own feet and a startled counselor who shrieked and glowed neon pink in protest. "My bad, really just a misstep," Kale shouted. Elysra's voice, smooth and lethal, cut through the chaos. "If you survive this, you owe me reparations, and possibly a lifetime supply of whatever it is humans eat for courage." Kale grinned nervously. "Pizza. Is that acceptable, or do you require something fancier?" The chase carried them through a corridor of floating walkways, each one humming with quantum energy. Elysra darted ahead, and Kale tried to keep up, occasionally bumping into walls and activating random machinery that shot harmless but brightly colored sparks into the air. At one point, Kale accidentally pressed a button that launched a miniature drone army, which immediately began chasing the council members instead. Elysra paused mid-leap, raising an eyebrow. "You really are a walking disaster," she said, and Kale could have sworn he saw the faintest trace of a smile. And yet somehow amusing. They reached a high balcony overlooking the city, towers of glass and light stretching into the violet sky. The council closed in, their weapons drawn and expressions as cold as frozen stars. Kale, completely panicked, looked at Elysra. "Do we fight, or do we?" He trailed off as a stray ion blast hit a floating transport container which teetered dangerously. Elysra grabbed a loose cable and swung across, knocking Kale along behind her like a rag doll. "Do not think. Just move," she instructed. Her tone carried both exasperation and faint amusement, which made Kale feel a confusing mixture of terror and pride. They landed in an alley filled with bioluminescent flora that hummed faintly, reacting to their presence. Kale paused to catch his breath, hands on his knees. "So, this is your city." he asked, trying to sound casual, though he was certain he looked like a drowned rat in a velvet cloak. Elisra glared. "You are lucky to be alive, human. Consider yourself a temporary asset." Kale straightened, trying to look heroic, though he probably looked ridiculous. "Temporary asset. I like it. Sounds professional." Elisra tilted her head, ears flicking in a way that suggested a mix of annoyance and reluctant fondness. Above them, the violet sky shimmered with the arrival of hovering council ships. Kale groaned. "We're really bad at hide-and-seek, aren't we?" Elisra shot him a glance that could have frozen a star. "We are not playing hide-and-seek. We are surviving, and you," she waved a hand at him, "are ridiculously expendable." Kale saluted, wobbling slightly. "Aye, aye, Captain, expendable human reporting for duty." Elisra rolled her eyes, though Kale noticed her lips twitch in a way suspiciously like a smile. They moved deeper into the twisting alleys, Elisra's long ears flicking at every sound, every faint movement, every approaching threat. Kale tried to keep up, tripping over an oddly squishy, floating creature that squeaked indignantly, and he whispered, "Sorry, I think." Elisra muttered something under her breath about humans and grace, and Kale grinned. Somehow, despite the danger, despite the alien assassin drones, despite the very real possibility of instant death, he felt alive. And Elisra, for all her alien composure and lethal elegance, seemed to tolerate his presence. Perhaps, Kale thought with a mischievous hope, she even enjoyed it a little. The alley ended at a massive bio-bridge spanning 2 towers, its surface rippling like liquid glass. Elisra stepped forward, eyes gleaming faintly. "After this, human, we might actually make it out alive, or die spectacularly." Kale grinned, spreading his arms. "Either way, I call dibs on the dramatic exit, preferably with sparks and laser lights." Elisra shook her head, a faint, amused smile playing on her lips as they leapt together into the unknown, chased by a swarm of enraged, very dangerous vampires. Kale scrambled behind Elisra as they ducked into the Undercity, a labyrinth of bioluminescent tunnels and floating platforms, the walls pulsing with soft, iridescent light like they were alive and mildly offended by intruders. "So this is your home turf?" Kale asked, trying to sound casual while his legs screamed in protest. "It's colorful," he added, stepping on a glowing tendril that wiggled like it had opinions about him. Elisra's ears twitched sharply. "It's not a playground, human. Do not touch anything unless you want to be impaled by energy vines." Kale waved innocently. "Noted, totally not touching, probably." Almost immediately, a small vine shot up, snagging the hem of his jacket. Elisra smacked it aside with an irritated flick of her wrist. "You are a disaster." Kale grinned. "I prefer dynamic problem solver." They moved through the winding corridors, the city above them humming with the constant thrum of hovering ships and distant alarms. Elisra's senses were on high alert, ears flicking at every whisper and movement, her long hair brushing against her shoulders in the rhythm of her silent calculation. Kale, on the other hand, kept tripping over floating debris, accidentally activating a drone that buzzed around him like an overeager mosquito. "I swear it's friendly," he called, shooing it ineffectively. Elisra sighed, pinching the bridge of her nose. "Your incompetence is legendary, human. Truly, I am amazed you survive in the first place." Kale grinned sheepishly. "It's a talent, like juggling knives poorly." A sudden noise, a metallic clang echoing down the tunnel, made Kale stumble into a hovering crate filled with what looked suspiciously like sentient, squirming objects. What are these?" he asked, poking one. It squealed indignantly and flopped out of the crate, floating in midair. Elisra's eyes narrowed. "Bioluminescent security fauna. You've just offended them, again." Kale waved his hands. Sorry, I have terrible manners apparently." Elisra muttered something under her breath that sounded dangerously like amusement. "You may be a human, Kale, but somehow you are already my most infuriating ally." They pressed on, slipping through a hatch that led to a series of narrow skybridges connecting towers above the Undercity. Below them, The streets shimmered with alien traffic, vehicles shaped like liquid mirrors and insects, with cybernetic augmentations zooming through the chaos. "I think I see a cab," Kale whispered, pointing to a floating transport. Elisra gave him a flat look. "We do not take cabs while being hunted, human." Kale shrugged. "Worth asking. You never know, maybe it's one of those flying Uber things." Elisra's ears twitched. "If you make one more human joke, I will leave you dangling from the next anti-gravity rail." Kale held up his hands. "Duly noted." No dangling. He immediately stepped on a panel that lit up under his foot, causing the entire bridge to wobble. Elisra groaned, catching his arm and pulling him to safety with supernatural strength. "Why do I even bother?" she muttered. They rounded a corner and encountered a patrol of Elisra's pursuers, armed with energy glaives that hummed with deadly resonance. Kale froze. "Okay, that looks bad." Elisra smirked slightly. "Mildly," she said, then lunged forward, moving with uncanny speed and grace. Kale followed clumsily, ducking and rolling as he tried not to embarrass himself further. A laser narrowly missed him and he yelped. "Ow." That was almost painful, slightly more than almost. Elisra jabbed him in the shoulder. "Focus, human, or die spectacularly, your choice." Kale saluted mid-roll. "Aye, aye, Captain. Spectacular survival mode activated." In the chaos, Kale's clumsiness accidentally triggered a defense system, a cluster of floating energy pods that zipped around, bouncing off walls and scattering their enemies. Elisra raised an eyebrow. "Well, that worked. By accident." Kale gave a victorious fist pump. "See, talent." Elisra rolled her eyes, though her ears flicked in the faintest acknowledgement of amusement. They fought side by side, her precision complementing his improvisation, creating a chaotic, almost comical dance of survival. Elisra's long ears flicked constantly, reading the subtle movements of their attackers, while Kale somehow stumbled into perfect timing with her strikes, the two of them becoming an oddly effective pair. After a harrowing escape, they found temporary refuge in an abandoned hover-shipping terminal. Kale flopped onto a glowing bench, panting. That was exhilarating, also terrifying, mostly terrifying. Elisra leaned against a railing, her expression unreadable though the corner of her lips twitched. "You survive by sheer luck and absurdity, human, yet somehow I do not regret having you with me." Kale grinned. "That's comforting." I think Elisra's ears twitched in what could have been amusement. "Do not push your luck." Kale looked around at the eerie, glowing terminal, the floating crates humming softly in the shadows. "So, what now? More running, more accidental heroics." Elisra's eyes glimmered with sharp calculation. "We rest, briefly. Then we plan, and maybe, just maybe, you will learn not to touch everything in sight." Kale raised both hands in mock surrender. "I solemnly swear to try." No promises about grace, though. Elisra allowed a faint smile to flicker across her features, the first real sign of warmth Kale had seen. He grinned back, feeling an odd mixture of relief and pride. Somehow, in this alien world of peril and assassination, the human disaster known as Kale had found a place. Beside Elisra, the alien vampire queen, navigating chaos, danger, and perhaps just a little bit of unexpected camaraderie. The distant hum of the Undercity thrummed like a heartbeat as they settled, and Kale whispered with a grin, "Next time we get pizza first. Deal." Elisra's ears twitched sharply, though the ghost of a smile lingered. "Deal, human. But only if you survive until then." The hovering ruin stretched above the violet city like a jagged crown, suspended by anti-gravity cores that hummed with an almost musical resonance. Elisra crouched on the edge, her dark eyes scanning the approaching swarm of assassins, each one glinting with the cold menace of sharpened energy blades. Kale, as usual, was a step behind, arms flailing as he attempted to balance on a floating scaffold. Balance, yes, totally balanced," he shouted, wobbling precariously. Elisra's long ears flicked in exasperation. "If you fall human, I will personally file a complaint with the universe. You are not expendable today." Kale grinned sheepishly. Oh, come on, I make things interesting. The assassins closed in, sleek and relentless, but Kale's accidental heroics had never failed before. He fumbled with a crate of anti-gravity modules, accidentally ejecting one into the air. It spun wildly, zipping into the formation of attackers, tossing them like rag dolls. Elisra's lips twitched. Remarkable. You are an idiot and somehow effective. Kale bowed mid-struggle. Talent shines brightest under pressure, and chaos, mostly chaos. They moved as a unit. Elisra's alien grace perfectly complementing Kale's unpredictable improvisation. She dispatched enemies with precise strikes, her cloak shimmering with energy as she flipped and landed in impossible angles, while Kale tripped over floating cables, only to accidentally trigger defense mechanisms or knock enemies into precarious positions. At one point, a particularly tall assassin lunged at Kale, and he shoved an ionized container in its path. It exploded into a fountain of glowing plasma, sending both enemy and innocent-looking floating crates spinning. Whoops, Kale said, brushing sparks off his jacket. Elisra didn't respond. She was already pulling two more attackers off a collapsing skybridge with terrifying ease. As the battle raged, Kale began to understand Elisra in ways he hadn't before. Her laughter, so rare and almost imperceptible, cut through the tension when he accidentally bounced a laser back at another assassin. Her eyes, dark and glimmering, softened for a fraction of a second as she observed his determination amidst the chaos. And he, in turn, realized that courage didn't have to be flawless or dignified. It only had to exist, stubbornly and persistently, even when everything else screamed retreat. Elisra's pursuers regrouped, attempting a coordinated strike, but Kale, thinking quickly, grabbed a loose anti-gravity panel and spun it like a frisbee. It collided with a hovering energy conduit, sending a pulse that disrupted their electronics. Okay, that might have been genius, or catastrophic, he said, ducking as sparks rained around him. Elisra's ears twitched in silent acknowledgement. Genius by accident, she murmured, almost to herself. Finally, they reached the apex of the ruin, where the anti-gravity cores hummed with violet light. The last of the assassins lunged, only to be caught in a field of containment energy Kale had triggered inadvertently while stepping on another control panel. Elisra watched them tumble helplessly before she deactivated the field with a swift hand gesture. "We are done," she said calmly, though the faintest trace of amusement lingered. Kale, out of breath and covered in sparks, threw his hands up. "Victory, we survived. Who knew chaos could be so victorious?" Elisra finally allowed herself a full smile, the first since the execution attempt. "You are insufferable," she said, but the tone lacked its usual edge. "And somehow indispensable." Kale blinked. "Indispensable, I like the sound of that. Makes the sweat, burns, and near-death experiences worth it." She tilted her head, long ears brushing the violet air. "Perhaps, human, there is more to your species than I assumed." Kale laughed. "See, I knew humans were underestimated." They descended together from the hovering ruin, the city below quiet after the chaos, citizens staring at the unusual pair as rumors of the surviving vampire queen spread. Elisra glanced at Kale, her expression thoughtful. "You have changed things, human, not just for me but for them and perhaps for yourself." Kale scratched his head. "Changed things, me? I just followed you, mostly." Elisra's lips quirked. "And yet, your presence shifted the impossible into the possible. That is no small feat." For the first time, Kale considered what she meant. He had entered this alien world a bumbling, reckless human, entirely unprepared for the danger he faced. Now, despite every misstep, every accident, he realized he had contributed in ways that mattered, that his courage, messy, imperfect, and entirely human, had made a difference. And Elisra, the alien vampire queen, had begun to trust him, even rely on him, in ways neither of them could have anticipated. As they walked along the glowing streets, the city bathed in the soft light of twin moons, Kale nudged her playfully. "So pizza?" Elysra's ears twitched sharply and she let out a rare, melodic laugh. If you survive the journey there without tripping over the entire city, yes, pizza. Kale grinned broadly. Deal. Human hero mode still active. And slightly more graceful. Elysra shook her head, her long ears brushing her shoulders, but the faintest warmth glimmered in her dark eyes. The night stretched on, and for the first time both of them felt a fragile peace. The danger had passed, the assassins defeated, and the bond between human and alien had been forged in fire, chaos, and laughter. Kale had grown from a fumbling outsider into someone capable of heroism, albeit accidental, and Elysra had learned that even the most improbable ally could prove invaluable. Together, they walked beneath the violet sky, a human and an alien vampire queen, survivors of a world that had tried to tear them apart, but ultimately had left them stronger, wiser, and ready for whatever the stars might throw at them next. In that quiet moment, Kale realized that adventure, courage, and connection were not about perfection. They were about presence.